I never thought that taking something small, something forgotten and left behind could destroy an entire life. But the night I ignored the warning carved above that old shop's door, I learned what "don't steal" really meant. It was late October, and I was broke. Rent was overdue. My car was barely running, and I had just lost my job. Walking home one night, I passed through an old street downtown, one I had never noticed before. The air felt colder there, heavy with dampness, like the buildings themselves were breathing. Most of the shops were shuttered, boarded up, and abandoned. Except for one, the lights inside flickered weakly behind a dusty window, and a crooked wooden sign above the door read, "The Old Curiosities. Take nothing that I send to yours." At first, I thought it was just a secondhand junk shop. The display window was cluttered with oddities. Broken clocks, porcelain dolls with cracked faces, animal skulls, even a coffin-shaped mirror covered in dust. Something about it pulled me in, like invisible fingers curling around my spine, urging me to open the door. The bell above jingled as I stepped inside. The place smelled of candle wax and mildew. Shadows clung to the corners, and the aisles seemed to narrow, like the shelves were leaning in. Behind the counter, an old man sat hunched over, his face pale, his eyes sharp as glass. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, just muttered in a dry voice, "Look if you must, but remember the rule. Don't steal!" I nodded, pretending not to care, but my curiosity burned. The shelves were lined with strange trinkets, antique jewelry, jars filled with cloudy liquid, books bound in leather, too cracked to read. And then I saw it. A small silver locket, tarnished and delicate, resting on a black velvet cloth. It wasn't behind glass. No lock, no tag, no price. Just sitting there, as if waiting for me. When I picked it up, the air seemed to hum. My reflection in the mirror across from me looked wrong. My eyes were darker, my face thinner, my smile twisted, even though I wasn't smiling. The old man's voice cut through the silence. "Put it back!" I froze. "How much is it?" I asked. His reply was cold. "It isn't for you. Put it back and walk away." Something inside me rebelled. Maybe it was the hunger, the anger at my life falling apart, or the way he looked at me like I wasn't good enough. I slipped the locket into my pocket, turned my back, and walked out without another word. That was my first mistake. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the locket burning cold in my pocket like it had a heartbeat. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps in my apartment, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth in the kitchen. I thought maybe it was a burglar. I grabbed a knife and crept out, but the kitchen was empty. Empty, except for the locket. It was lying on the table, open, even though I hadn't touched it since I brought it home. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a girl. Her face was pale, her eyes black voids. And as I stared, I swear, her lips began to move. The whisper was faint at first. One word, over and over. Thief? 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 I slammed it shut and shoved it back into my pocket. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed me into my dreams, where I saw that same girl standing at the foot of my bed, her hollow eyes fixed on me. By morning, my apartment felt wrong. Shadows stretched too far, corners too deep. I tried to convince myself it was guilt, paranoia. But then I noticed the mirror in my bathroom. My reflection didn't move the way I did. When I raised my hand, it was slow, delayed. And when I smiled, it grinned too wide, teeth too sharp. I dropped the locket into a drawer, slammed it shut, and went out for air. But the world outside wasn't the same anymore. Strangers on the street stopped to stare at me with blank expressions. A busker on the corner stopped playing mid-song and hissed, "Put it back." That night, the girl from the locket came again, this time not in a dream. I woke to the sound of someone breathing in the dark, and there she was, standing in the corner of my room. Her skin was gray, her hair hung like wet strings, and her jaw hung loose as she whispered, "You took what wasn't yours. Now I take what is mine." I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed. My chest tight. She crawled across the floor on all fours, her limbs bending in ways that made no sense, her head twitching with each step. I shut my eyes, prayed, begged, and when I opened them again, she was gone. The locket was lying on my chest, open, and now the photograph was empty. The girl wasn't in it anymore. Over the next few days, things spiraled. Food rotted within hours of being brought home. My lights flickered and died. No matter how many times I locked my door, I'd wake to find it wide open. And the whispers grew louder. Not just thief, but now, my name. Over and over, I tried to throw the locket away. First in the garbage, then into a river. Even smashed it with a hammer. But every morning, it was back on my table, on my bed, once even clenched in my own fist when I woke up. Desperate, I went back to that street. Back to the old shop, but the building was gone. Not closed, not boarded up, gone. An empty lot stood where it had been. Nothing but weeds and broken glass. I realized then that I hadn't just stolen an object. I had stolen a curse! The last night I remember clearly. The whispers became screams. My walls shook, my lights exploded, and the girl from the locket dragged herself out of the mirror, her mouth open too wide, her eyes bottomless pits. She reached for me, her fingers like ice sinking into my chest, and whispered one last time, "Don't steal." I woke up outside, lying on the sidewalk at dawn, the locket clutched tight in my hand. My apartment doesn't exist anymore. My name isn't on any lease. No one remembers me living there. Now I wander from place to place, never staying long, because she always finds me. The locket always returns, and the girl always whispers, closer each time. So if you ever find yourself in some forgotten street, staring into the window of a shop that shouldn't exist, remember this? Look, but don't touch, because once you take something that isn't yours, it takes you.